Hello, and welcome to Soothing Pod's Sleep Stories. My name is Arif, and tonight I will be your guide as we journey back in time to the birth of one of the most remarkable goddesses of all time, Hera, the goddess of marriage, women and family, and the queen of the gods. We will follow her life of power, beauty, tragedy, and love, from her birth to her marriage to Zeus, the god of the sky, and one of the most powerful gods on earth. We will spend some lazy, peaceful days with her in the gardens of the Hesperides, where she gradually grew into the goddess we all know today. Before we begin, however, let us take a moment to unwind and find comfort in the place that we are in, here and now. Close your eyes and allow your body to sink into the mattress beneath you. Here and now, there are no obligations. There are no responsibilities. By simply closing your eyes and listening to the sound of my voice, you are already providing your body with the rest and nourishment that it needs. You are slowly healing yourself and giving yourself the gift of rest, whether you are falling asleep or not. Together, we will gradually work our way towards sleep, but know that every step of the way, you are nourishing both your body and your mind. With your eyes closed and your body sinking deeper and deeper into the mattress beneath you, take a moment to really feel the points of contact you have with the mattress. Notice how your legs, arms, torso, and head feel as they are embraced by the soft bed beneath you. After a long day, they are being invited to let go of any weight they have been carrying, as are you. For a moment, let us imagine that you are not lying in your bed. Instead, you are reclining peacefully on a big, fluffy white cloud. It is as soft as cotton, and it wraps around you as if you are sinking into the world's most comfortable beanbag chair. Though the cloud itself is wispy and otherworldly, and you can brush your fingers through its outer edges, it is sufficiently dense and supportive and plush beneath you, making you feel protected no matter where the cloud may be floating. Bits of the cloud rise up around you, cradling you like a soft blanket. It curls up beneath your chin, around your shoulders, over your arms and legs. It provides you with a layer of warmth and comfort unlike anything else. You feel like you are truly being embraced by the cloud. Slowly, the cloud begins to move down from the sky at a steady, gentle pace. You are floating effortlessly down toward the lush and wild landscape on the earth below you. There are nothing but meadows and forests splashed across the countryside. You can't see any houses for miles, and you like it that way. The cloud glides down so you are skirting just above the beautiful, breathtaking countryside. You feel like a bird sailing above the world, taking it in from an entirely new, life-changing angle. You soar around trees and over meadow grasses, close enough so you could reach out and touch them if you'd like to. And so, you do. With gentle fingers, you extend your hand out over the edge of the cloud. You're moving at a slow and steady pace between the trees and just over the grasses. Your fingers brush over leaves and wildflowers and blades of grass, caressing them with a magic touch. You let your hand dangle there, mingling with the flowers and leaves and beautiful earth that is moving so smoothly all around you. Overhead, there are clouds much like the one you are lying on. They are cottony puffs against a baby blue sky, so elegant and perfect that it feels like they were plucked out of a nostalgic dream long, long ago. When you take a deep breath in, tasting the nectar of the wildflowers and the freshness of the air, you notice that the clouds above you grow thicker, taking up almost the entire sky. When you breathe out, the clouds slowly recede and disappear, revealing more of that stunning baby blue sky to you. You breathe in deeply and wholly, watching as the sky dims with clouds above you. Then you exhale, feeling the sunlight wash over your skin as the clouds clear more and more. You breathe in, watching more clouds gather in the beautiful sky above you. And you exhale, feeling the sunlight splash across your smooth skin as the clouds clear, revealing more of that brilliant sky. Know that you can return to this visual at any time to ground yourself in your breathing and to recognize the ability you have inside you to relax and soothe yourself, to visualize anything that you would like. Now that we have taken the time to relax and find comfort in the place that we are in, here and now, let us begin our story. Hera was born soon after the universe itself was born, brought to the earth as the child of the great Titan Cronus and Titaness Rhea. She was a sibling of many powerful gods: Hades, Poseidon, Demeter, Hestia, and her eventual husband, Zeus. Soon after Hera and the others were born, however, the Titan Cronus learned of his destiny. that he would be overthrown by one of his children, a being obsessed with power and the ability to have control over others. Cronus could simply not bear the thought of being overthrown by one of his children. Despite his wife's begging, he decided the only way to prevent this from happening was to swallow his children whole. Rhea, however, loved her children more than she loved any kind of power, more than she loved Cronus himself. When Cronus asked for his youngest child Zeus so that he could swallow him, Rhea instead handed him a heavy stone wrapped in swaddling clothes. The Titan picked the stone up between his fingers and swallowed it, none the wiser. Satisfied that his position of power was saved, Cronus happily went about his days. Rhea had hope that Zeus would be able to save his siblings, including the beautiful and intelligent Hera. Rhea sent Zeus away in the dead of night to the island of Crete, urging him to grow big and strong so that one day he could return and recover his siblings from his father. Eventually, that day came. Zeus returned to his homeland, and with some clever trickery, he had his father drink a vomit-inducing potion. Cronus first disgorged a stone, followed by all of Zeus's siblings, one by one. A long and arduous series of battles ensued, in which the older generation of Titans, headed by Cronus, fought against the new generation of gods, led by Zeus, that would later become known as the Olympians. This war was called the War of the Titans. In the end, the Olympians and their allies prevailed, and Cronus, together with most of the other Titans, were sent to Tartarus, where they would never have to be seen again. And so, once more, Hera was delivered into a beautiful new world. However, she was not to be raised like her siblings on Mount Olympus. By some accounts, Hera was raised and lived her early life in the gardens of the Hesperides, and were the gardens of the Hesperides a beautiful place to grow and learn. The gardens of the Hesperides were a lush, vast series of gardens far, far away from the world. It was said to be the most beautiful place on the entire earth, and very few people or gods were allowed to go there. The Hesperides, or the Western Maidens, resided in the flourishing gardens. They were the nymphs of the evening, representations of the golden light simmering across the horizon and sweeping over the mountains at the end of every day. They fit their roles perfectly. They were beautiful, calm, contemplative, joyful nymphs. Their hair was strawberry blonde and a deep, rich red and ginger. Their clothes seemed to be sewn from silk and gold itself. glistening with every single graceful step they took across the gardens. Every evening, they would lead the way before Nyx caused the sun to set, working in unison to paint the sky and the land in the stunning blanket of marigold light. They spent their days lazing in the gardens and basking in the light of the sun, soaking in the rays as if it nourished them, as if it fueled them. They were nymphs that enjoyed life for exactly what it was, and soaked it up in a way that few other creatures did. That being said, it was a fairly easy thing to do in a place as wildly beautiful as their gardens. Lakes dotted the mountainous landscape, full of rolling evergreen hills. Lakes that seemed to always have a glassy sheen to them, never peppered with whitecaps, never blemished by a single wave. The sun and clouds were reflected in them like a perfect mirror. And when the sun set, with the help of the Hesperides every evening, the lakes were a portrait of gold and orange. There were rivers that rushed down the mountain slopes, drawn between the trees as if Mother Nature herself had taken her finest brush and painted them there in long, winding strokes. The rivers bubbled over rocks and around bends, but they were perfectly clear. You could see the rainbow mosaic of stones blanketing the bottom of the river. Stones of pink, orange, blue, and purple. Stones that were freckled with specks of black, white, and gray, each dot more stunning than the last. And then there were the plants and flowers of the garden. Though the Hesperides hardly had to tend to them, the gardens were the finest that existed anywhere on earth. Fruits and berries and nuts sprung from them with abundance, coating the landscape with oranges, greens, yellows, reds, and purples. There was always enough food to go around, so much that one could pluck a full meal from a single bed within the garden. There were orchards as far as the eye could see, but none were quite as special as Hera's orchard. She spent most of her time there, tending to the apple trees and olive trees and citrus trees. She truly loved nature in a way that few people are able to. She swore she could feel the soil breathing beneath her feet. She could feel the plants asking her for water and offering her their bounty with glee. She spent many of her childhood days in that orchard, pruning the trees and gathering their fruit in wooden baskets. She walked barefoot nearly all the time through the garden, savoring the feeling of the soil and soft evergreen grass on her feet. When she wasn't tending to the garden, she was often playing with the Hesperides, They would bathe in the rivers together and spend time unwinding in hot springs. Sometimes they would gaze up at the clouds and call out their imagined shapes. They loved to play tag alongside the rivers and sing songs to one another, beautiful songs that could bring a tear to your eye. Their lives together there were peaceful and full of days with nothing but joy and beauty. However, as is often the case, those days could not last forever. As Hera grew older, her carefree days of having leaf races down the meandering streams and lounging relaxed in wildflower-coated meadows grew less and less frequent. The other gods, her siblings, came to visit her rather often. After all, she was a sibling of Zeus and a goddess of immense power. She loved her sisters, though she had a distaste for Zeus of all the gods. She had heard of his numerous liaisons with women, gods and humans and nymphs alike. She knew he was a man who often brought tragedy with him, and she questioned his decision-making skills at her very core. But Hera was happy she didn't have to see Zeus that often. She spent many of her days chatting with her other siblings as she worked barefoot in the garden. Some of her siblings teased her for not using the full extent of her abilities, but Hera didn't mind it too much, because some days she used them as much as she liked. Sometimes she would lie down in the soft meadows of the gardens, the sweet grass dancing around her, the crickets chirping in their cozy nooks and crannies in the trees at the edge of the grass. When she was sure no one else was watching, she would reach up toward the clouds and brush her hands over them, taking hold of them elegantly. With ease and cool, gentle breaths, Hera was able to mold the clouds into whatever she desired. She could form them into shapes. She could cause more to appear. She could make them disappear at will. She had the power to control and move the skies, a power that was only matched by Zeus himself. And soon, Zeus became aware of this. From a hiding spot, he watched Hera for quite some time as she went about her life in the gardens of the Hesperides. He admired her more and more with each passing day. The way she cared for the earth, the way she went about her daily business with a smile on her face, and especially the way she cared for the animals of the garden. Hera was a goddess who loved animals with every fiber of her being. Zeus watched one day as a bird fell from a nest, hurting its wing. To Zeus, the stunning little sparrow was a lost cause. There were millions more exactly like it, flying through the forests and skies of their land. He expected Hera to move along and continue about her day, ignoring the little bird. But instead, Hera looked down at the wounded animal with tears shimmering in her eyes. She knelt in the grass, staining her bare knees and the hem of her beautifully woven dress a bright, rich green. Dirt and freshly wet soil stuck to her soft skin, but she paid it no mind. Her focus was almost entirely on the sweet little bird that was flapping its good wing and calling out to the world, asking for someone to help it. Hera clicked her tongue against her teeth and shook her head sadly. "You poor little thing," she muttered to the bird. As gently as she could, she scooped the incredibly small animal into the soft palm of her hand. At first, the bird called out, afraid of her touch. But Hera soothed it with her melodic voice, promising the bird that she would not harm it. It was clear that as soon as the bird touched Hera, it could feel her energy. It nestled its downy little head against Hera's fingertips, gazing up at her with affectionate eyes. Hera smiled down at the bird, promising to take care of it and help it grow big and strong so it could survive out in the gardens. And that is precisely what she did. Zeus watched as hours turned to days, and days turned to weeks. And with each passing moment, Hera tended to the bird. Every morning, she would awaken and head out into the gardens, using her bare hands to dig in the earth for worms to feed the bird. She didn't mind the feeling of the damp, fresh soil on her hands, nor the earthy, fragrant aroma that danced in the air as she searched through the rich loam. Eventually, without fail, she would find a few worms buried in the soil. She would plop them into one of her hands, and then, with the other hand, she would wander around the gardens for a few moments, gathering whatever seeds the flowers and plants had dropped overnight. Then, with a smile on her face, just as the sun began to rise, she would sit with the bird and feed it by hand. The bird would slowly pick at the seeds, being careful that it was gentle enough not to harm Hera's soft skin. When it was finished, each and every day, it would nuzzle against Hera affectionately, curling its head and injured wing against her fingers. It was clear that the bird trusted Hera with its life, and Hera loved it with all of her heart. Zeus had never seen a creature and a human interact in such a way. Hera had nothing but love in her heart for the creatures of the forest. It wasn't just the birds, Zeus soon learned. It was the small mammals, the fish swimming in the pond, even the bees and butterflies that glided through the gardens, pollinating the flowers. And, in turn, it seemed that all the animals loved Hera, too. They frequently scurried out of the forests when they saw Hera coming, eager to be near her, to hear her honey-sweet voice as she sang to them, or asked them how their days were going, knowing she would never get an answer. Soon, the bird grew big enough to be released. Its wing was healthy and fluffy with beautifully sheen feathers. Hera stood at the edge of her home with the little bird in her hands. She gave the bird a tearful goodbye, wishing it well as it continued its life in the gardens. The bird nuzzled against her hand a final time before it took off into the garden, melding in with the color of the sky until it disappeared from view. Zeus watched from his hiding spot as Hera fought tears for the little bird. She was happy to have saved it, but filled with sorrow at the thought of parting with it. Zeus was overcome by emotion, seeing Hera so vulnerable and connected to the world. He knew in that instant that he wanted to be with Hera, that she would be his bride. The other gods had been saying for quite some time that Hera was the only reasonable match for Zeus. She was beautiful, intelligent, and her power was the only power that rivaled his own. Their mother, of course, was against the union, but Zeus paid no mind to that. Desperate to have Hera as his wife, Zeus descended from his hiding place to woo her. It was normally easy for Zeus to woo women, nymphs, and goddesses alike, so he was not shy of approaching her at all. He walked in the garden with her, talking with her for quite some time. He didn't notice that Hera was stepping away from him, uninterested and clearly wishing he would leave. Zeus's confidence and narcissism didn't allow him to see the disregard that she clearly had for him. And so, at the end of the day, as the Hesperides set off to paint the landscape in a stunning array of gold and orange, Zeus asked Hera to be his bride. Hera took a step back, shocked and displeased by the sudden question. After all she had heard of Zeus, a simple walk in the garden with him could not change her opinion of him. She turned Zeus down without any particular gentleness. She knew he was someone that didn't take no for an answer, so she tried to be as transparent as she could be. Zeus left the garden in a whirlwind. He could not believe he had been rejected by Hera. He had never wanted a woman as his bride like he wanted Hera. And so, though it was incredibly inappropriate, Zeus continued to pursue her. Morals were not Zeus's strong suit, after all. For several days, for several weeks, for several months, Zeus came to the garden to try and talk to Hera into marrying him. Some days, Hera would walk along the river with him and talk to him. Others, she would instantly send him away, tired of his propositions. She was growing more and more frustrated with Zeus with every passing day. And Zeus, too, was growing tired of Hera's rejections. He thought back to the moment that made him fall for her and desire her as a bride. Her tending to that lost and injured bird, helping give it a fighting chance to survive. The way she loved animals and connected with them was unlike anything Zeus had ever seen. And it was then that Zeus came up with a plan. Knowing how dearly Hera cared for animals, he believed if he was an animal, he could make her fall in love with him. One night, as Hera curled up in her bed with the fireplace crackling by her feet, Zeus sent a massive storm over the gardens. Hera paid it no mind, enjoying the sound of the rain against the roof overhead. Zeus transformed himself into a beautiful cuckoo bird and descended into the storm. By the time he reached Hera's house, he was soaked to the bone, hardly able to keep flying. He crash-landed on the windowsill with a thud, alerting Hera to his presence. She rose from bed, casting her woven blanket aside and clutching a hand to her chest as she made her way over to the window to investigate the noise. When she reached the windowsill and saw the cuckoo lying there, its feathers disheveled, its entire body quivering with the cold of the rain, her guard immediately fell. "You poor dear," she muttered in her smooth, sweet voice. Gently, perhaps even more gently than she had picked up the sparrow, she picked up Zeus in his cuckoo form. She remarked that she couldn't believe the bird had flown in such a powerful storm, clearly feeling pity for the poor thing trapped out in the rain. She promised Zeus that she would dry him and keep him warm. She crossed her house and sat by the fire. With a wool cloth, she slowly dried off Zeus, feather by feather. Her touch was so gentle that Zeus wanted to transform and confess his love once more, but he held himself back. Once he was dry, Hera nestled him beneath her bosom, hoping to keep him warm there. Zeus nestled there happily as Hera rocked him. With the fire crackling beside her, she told Zeus some stories, hoping that it would provide the bird with some comfort. With each word, Zeus fell more and more in love with Hera, and Hera grew more and more connected to the precious creature in her arms. Hera spent all night caring for the bird and nursing it back to health. When the time finally came for her to set it free, she decided she would keep the bird with her for the night, at least until the rain cleared. But as she set the bird down in her bed, the bird transformed into Zeus. Hera was shocked to see Zeus standing at the end of her bed. He told Hera once more of his love for her, of her beauty and the compassion with which she treated all living creatures. He spoke of her and her power highly, promising that he would never stop her from doing the things she loved. Hera was surprised by how she felt for Zeus at the end of the speech. She knew she had been tricked by him and was certain she would be tricked again. And yet, she knew one day she would have to be wed, and she felt she was lucky to marry a man who loved her as deeply as Zeus seemed to on that rainy night in the cabin. Hera agreed to marry Zeus. Together, they had a secret wedding at the edge of a lake, far from their parents. As a wedding present, Hera was given a tree that bore golden apples. She planted the tree in the garden and visited it nearly every day. It was her prized possession, and she was grateful to spend many of her days in the comfort of its shade. Hello, and welcome to Soothing Pod's Sleep Stories. My name is Arif, and tonight I will be your guide as we journey through ancient Greece with Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, nature, the moon, and childbirth. We will learn of Artemis's upbringing and her life in adulthood. Artemis, the goddess of wilderness, vegetation, and childbirth, came to this earth under rather strange circumstances. Long ago, Zeus, the god of thunder, laid eyes upon Leto, the goddess of motherhood. The moment Zeus saw her, he was utterly struck by her beauty and strength. For days, he could not bring himself to think of anything aside from the grace of her movements, her mesmerizing hair, the way he felt when her breathtaking gaze swept up to look at him. He was love-struck, and seeing no other way to solve this, he decided to pursue Leto. And Leto, too, had been struck by an overwhelming passion for the god. Looking upon him made her heart leap as it had never leaped before. She felt a strange wave of calm and excitement wash over her, a wave that she was happy to be completely submerged in. There was peace in the wave. She felt her future in the wave. It did not take long for Zeus and Leto to become completely entangled with one another. Escapes into the forest, week after week, only caused their love to grow, and soon Leto discovered that she was pregnant. But there was a problem with Leto being pregnant. Zeus was still married to Hera, the queen of gods. Though Hera was regularly vengeful of any human or nymph lovers that Zeus took on, she almost never retaliated against any goddesses or titans. Things, however, were different with Leto. When Hera discovered that she was carrying her husband's children, she became enraged and heartbroken. In an attempt to prevent Leto from giving birth, she issued an order preventing everyone on earth to give Leto shelter in order for her to bear her children. Leto was forced to wander from land to land, desperate to give birth, but no one would allow her to stay. Finally, she stumbled upon the island of Delos, the barren floating island made by her sister, Asteria, so that Leto could give birth. Leto settled on the island, and with the help of a few goddesses and nymphs, she finally gave birth to her twins, whom she named Artemis and Apollo. Apollo was a proud and powerful god, practically from the moment he was born. He soon became a symbol of youth and beauty. His features were so divine, so stunning, that he was ethereal. He was the god of archery, the sun, music, and dance. Most of the Greek gods loved and admired him, and he went on to have many romances with several powerful and divine beings. Artemis, however, approached life in a much more demure way. She was a beautiful goddess, much like her mother, and she knew from an early age that she would be pursued by gods and mortals alike when she came of age. But Artemis did not require nor desire the love of men. She found all the joy she needed in the peace of the forest. When she was just a teenager, Artemis made the long journey up to Olympus to visit her father, Zeus. Zeus was surprised to see his daughter, who so infrequently visited him. She told her father that she had made certain choices for her life, and she wanted him to acknowledge and respect them. Firstly, she wanted to remain a maiden forever, a virgin untouched by romantic love and the hands of another. She did not want to be held down by any relationship or person, nor did she want to be pursued by anyone. Zeus was puzzled by this request at first. Many of his children were fond of romance. Some would say too fond of romance. They enjoyed the power they had as gods, and they enjoyed pursuing other powerful people in ancient Greece. But that was clearly not at all what Artemis was seeking. Still a bit unsure, Zeus agreed to Artemis's request, promising to aid her in making sure her wishes were respected. But that wasn't the only request that young Artemis had. She smiled at her father, pleased by how well the conversation was going. She told her father that she would like a bow and arrows. A bow and arrows crafted by the mighty Cyclops. Zeus was once again surprised. Apollo was the god of archery, He could gift Artemis a bow and arrows at any time, but that is not what she wanted. She told Zeus that so many of the gods and goddesses viewed Apollo as all-powerful and her as an afterthought. She wanted to prove to the world and to Olympus that she was just as strong and talented as her brother was, no matter what it took. Sensing how important this was to Artemis, and also well aware that this is not something he would be able to reject with ease, Zeus went to the Cyclops and procured a powerful bow and arrows from them. Artemis happily tucked them away in her quiver, a quiver that she had been using for over a decade by then. She truly was just as skilled as her brother, though few were able to recognize that. But Artemis had one final request for her father, and it was perhaps the most important. She asked Zeus if he could help her form a group of nymphs who would travel through the woods, forests, and marshes with her, protecting any young girls or women that were in need of help. Zeus believed this to be a noble quest, though he was rather surprised by it. He agreed to help Artemis form a group of nymphs that she could travel with during her duty to protect young women. With that, Artemis was pleased. She offered her father her gratitude and then headed on her way, excited about the future and her destiny. Her soul was at peace, knowing that her life's purpose was waiting for her along her chosen path. And so it began. Artemis no longer resided in Olympus, nor on the island of Delos that she had been born on. She had gone on to wander through more miraculous places, wilder places that better matched her roving heart and free spirit. She disappeared into the forests and woodlands surrounding what she referred to as City of Men. And it was in these forests that Artemis began to live a life beyond her wildest dreams. A life that was so fulfilling, so overflowing with joy, promise, and hope, that it seemed as though it had been ripped from the pages of a fairy tale book, albeit a non-traditional one. Artemis wanted to live a life full of all the things that ignited her with joy and delight. She wanted to spend each day refreshing her soul and embracing the purpose of her life in the nature that surrounded her. And it was in the woods that she could do just that. Some days, Artemis would awaken as the sun rose up over the mountains, encircling the beautiful forest that she was living in. The golden rays of the sun, rays that were brought down by her own brother, Apollo, would splash across her face, flooding her body with comforting warmth that always stirred her awake with a smile. In those early morning minutes, she would allow her eyes to flutter open slowly and take in the forest around her. And my, was there a lot of incredible things to take in. The forest around her was lush, with leaves that were as plush as pillows and as fragrant as the fields of wildflowers that were found just beneath them. The entire forest was a kaleidoscope of green, emerald and sage and moss and jade, a mix of fresh shades that danced and swirled against one another with every gust of wind that laced through the trees. The rays of golden sunlight always seemed to stream through them, like they were swaths of paint drawn down from the sky. These beams of sunlight sparkled and shimmered, illuminating the plush forest floor and every plant and leaf that it had the pleasure of brushing over in those dewy drops of gold. It truly looked too stunning, too frozen in time to exist in this world. And yet, Artemis awakened to it each and every morning. She would stay there in bed for a long moment, looking out over the forest. Her gaze would often drift up to the treetops, where birds were shaking off the comfort of sleep and embracing the promise of a new day. Their fuzzy feathers glistened in the early morning light as they dipped and dove from tree to tree, shaking branches lightly and rattling leaves with every new path they effortlessly carved through the forest. It wasn't just the beauty of their movements that fueled Artemis's cup. It was the beauty of their song and the poetic simplicity of her life among them. Artemis loved music almost as much as she loved the hunt, and almost as much as she loved providing safety and protection to the women in need. As soon as the birds began to sing their beautiful melody into the universe, Artemis was rising to her feet, eager to embrace the bright and wonderful day before her. She would walk to the riverside, slinking through the shadows of the giant, ancient trees to do so. As a chaste goddess, a goddess of protection, Artemis often liked to travel without being seen. It was something she was very comfortable doing, something that gave her an extra layer of confidence that she was very happy to embrace. She was okay with being unseen in the world because she was a person who felt the world so deeply regardless. She would often arrive at the riverbed with a smile on her face. This early in the morning, it seemed as though even the fish themselves had yet to stir. She would remove the cloak that she often wore, delighted by the feeling of the fresh morning air brushing against her skin. And slowly, ever so slowly, she would descend into the water. With every step she took, the cool water would rise more and more over her body, welcoming her to this invigorating, refreshing world. The smoothness of the rocks beneath her feet was an ultimate comfort for her. She felt most at home in flowing rivers and streams like these, places far removed from the rest of the world, where she could listen to the song of the birds in peace and let her thoughts wander around her like petals on a capricious breeze. It was not long before the nymphs would awaken. Artemis greeted them all with a bright smile, urging them to join her in the water as they did nearly every morning. Some of the nymphs joined, stepping into the cool water one after the other. But some of the nymphs remained out of the water, dangling only their toes or hands in the cool current. Then some of the nymphs would begin to play instruments. Some would strum their lyres, sending a breathtaking melody echoing through this secluded part of the forest where they could simply be free. Embracing the music and the feeling of this kind of freedom, the girls often danced with one another. It was not a dance for anyone but themselves. They were not dancing to impress, nor to attract any attention. They were dancing to feel their souls grow within their bodies. They were dancing to express joy, to express the sheer, untethered love that they had for the universe. As their bodies moved, their joy only grew. It felt so freeing to be so connected to nature and so entangled with the music and the feelings of peace and happiness that it brewed inside of them. For quite some time, they would dance to the music. They'd smile and laugh with one another, and sometimes they would dance in silence, their eyes closed as they truly felt the power of the music. Slowly, as the time passed, the nymphs playing the music would strum slower and slower. The music would gradually die down. The harmonies and melodies instead replaced by the wondrous and fulfilling sounds of the forest. The beautiful calls of the birds became louder. The babbling of the stream around them, as it brushed against their skin, became a drone that they were tuned into and aware of yet again. The sound of the leaves dancing in the wind was so clear that they felt as though they could name each leaf that was brushing against another. With that, the girls knew it was time to continue on with their day. Often, they would step out of the stream to dry off and would share breakfast and food with one another. They they would sit along the edge of the river, not quite yet ready to leave it, and offer fruit to one another. They would pluck the ruby-red seeds of a pomegranate out of its shell and eat them bite by bite, relishing the taste of the sweet and sharp juice as it ran over their tongues. Every slice of life was to be savored, appreciated, and breakfast was no different. Gradually, the day would often wear on, and Artemis would decide what it was she exactly felt like doing that day. She often floated from task to task, like she was being pushed by a gentle breeze, without too much urgency or stress involved. She knew that she was here to enjoy life and partake in the simple pleasures that it offered. At the same time, she knew she had a role to protect women, a role that she took rather seriously. And so, every day, she would put her fingers to her lips and let out a whistle that cut through the forest with ease. The nymphs would wait by her side, smiling and humming in unison as they waited patiently for what was to come next. They would hear the sounds of the hooves before they could see the creatures causing the noise. It was a distant rumble at first, so distant it was almost deniable that you had heard anything at all. But gradually, the noise would grow and grow until it sounded like a smooth and graceful herd of animals making their way through the forest. And indeed it was. While many of the Greek gods and goddesses had chariots pulled by noble steeds or fantastical creatures, Artemis had a chariot that was pulled by deer. Every time Artemis laid eyes on her deer, she was overcome by feelings of love and care. The deer were beautiful, fragile, graceful creatures. When they looked at her, their large, fuzzy ears would flap with delight, backlit and silhouetted by the light of steadily rising sun. Their tawny coats and white underbellies seemed to glow, without a single speck of dirt on them. Their black noses twitched as their dark brown eyes looked upon Artemis as a friend and a guide. And, truly, Artemis was, because every day she would climb atop her chariot, taking a few of the nymphs with her. With a gentle snap of her reins, the deer would take off, leading her and nymphs into the forest to explore and see if there was anyone in need of their help. Along the way, Artemis and the nymphs would admire nature, taking in the beauty of the landscape around them. They talked about the trees that grew taller and greener every day. They talked about the wildflowers, which seemed to be expanding across the meadows more and more with every drop of nourishing sunshine and life-giving rain. But gradually, the conversation would slow, because almost every day, the women would start to sense something in the forest. Some days, they would come upon a young girl who had traveled too far from her hometown in search of firewood or food. It was an unforgiving forest. It was, indeed, true wilderness. When Artemis and the nymphs would find the girl, very often, she would be terrified, sure that she was never going to get home again. But Artemis would greet the girl with a smile and welcome her onto the chariot, wrapping her arms around her as she steered to make her feel safe. Artemis would talk to the lost girl about the forest as the deer took them toward the girl's home. Their farewells at the edge of the village were always full of cheerfulness and eternal gratitude. Sometimes, Artemis would find a woman that was trying to escape men who were pursuing her, women who simply wanted to live their lives. And, much like the lost girls, Artemis would welcome these women onto her chariot and drive them to safety. Only, in these cases, Artemis shot her silver arrows through the forest, warding off the men that were pestering the poor woman. It was a job that took up much of her time, a job that involved a lot of rescuing, a lot of searching through the large forest, and a lot of heart-to-hearts. But at the end of the day, there was nothing Artemis would rather be doing. Every night, as Artemis laid her head down on her bed, she felt a wave of satisfaction wash over her. She had spent the day eating berries and fruits she foraged with her nymphs. She had bathed in a river and danced to the song of songbirds and lyres. She had traveled through the forest to help another woman find peace. And every night, as the moon began to rise up over the lush canopy of trees, it would wash Artemis in a silver cloak. And as it did so, Artemis would smile, because she knew that she was fulfilled. Hello, and welcome to Soothing Pod's Sleep Stories. My name is Arif, and tonight I will be your guide on a journey through the myths of ancient Greece. Together, we will explore the hallowed halls of Mount Olympus and follow the story of Hestia, the goddess of home and hearth. In the quiet sanctum of her bedroom on Mount Olympus, Hestia, the eldest of the gods, was enjoying some well-deserved alone time. Outside, the raucous sounds of a party echoed through the halls, a cacophony of laughter and music that seemed to shake the very foundations of the celestial abode. The distant sound of music and mirth tempted Hestia for a brief moment. Maybe she should join them. But then the crash of glass, followed by a surge of laughter, quickly changed her mind. The noise, the chaos, it was all too much. She preferred the tranquil embrace of her own space, surrounded by the gentle flicker of the hearth. Hestia was, after all, the goddess of the hearth and home, a deity who found comfort in the quiet and the calm, far removed from the boisterous revelry of her fellow gods. Her domain was one of warmth and serenity, where the gentle crackling of firewood and the soft glow of embers spoke more to her soul than any wild celebration could. In this peaceful haven, Hestia embraced the stillness. She had always been this way, ever since she could remember. She blamed the circumstances around her birth for her introspective nature. You see, the day that she was born was the day her father had received word of a curse, that he would be overthrown by one of his children. No sooner than Hestia had been born, her father threw her up into the air, opened his mouth, and swallowed her whole. And when her siblings were born, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, and lastly Zeus, he did the same with them. One by one he gobbled them up, fearing the prophecy's fulfillment. For many years, the 6 children lived inside their father's belly, until Zeus broke them free and they took their rightful place atop Mount Olympus. It was these years in the dark, caring for her younger siblings, that Hestia believed made her the quiet and caring goddess she was today. In the grand hall, the party continued. Hestia, settling into a comfortable chair, opened a book. Soon she was lost in the rhythm of words. That was until the door creaked open. Hera, her sister and queen of the gods, entered. Hera walked with a grace that seemed to make the room glow. Behind her sauntered Demeter, Hestia's younger sister and goddess of the harvest. Hestia, you're missing out. The party is just divine, Demeter exclaimed. Hera's eyes were kinder, filled with an understanding that belied her queenly stature. Hestia, why do you always choose solitude over celebration? Hestia closed her book gently, her voice as soft as the light from the hearth. After so many years in the darkness of our father's belly, I've grown to cherish the quiet, she explained. Demeter laughed, a sound that seemed too loud in the serenity of Hestia's room. But we are all there, Hestia. All of us. It wasn't just you in the belly, and we all turned out fine. Yes, but none of you were there as long as I, Hestia replied calmly, her eyes reflecting the wisdom of ages. Being the eldest, I spent the most time in that shadow. It taught me the value of peace, of a tranquil heart. Demeter shrugged. Well, if you ever change your mind, the party awaits. With a whirl of her vibrant dress, she left the room, her laughter echoing down the hall. Hera lingered, her gaze filled with a gentle concern. "Aren't you ever lonely, Hestia?" Hestia smiled, a soft, contented curve of her lips. "I am never alone. I have the warmth of the hearth, the company of my thoughts. Solitude is a friend, not a foe." Hera nodded, her expression a mix of admiration and worry. "You're stronger than most realize, sister." With a graceful nod, she departed, leaving Hestia in her cherished solitude. Alone again, Hestia gazed into the flames of her hearth. Her mind wandered to the coming dawn, to the announcement she had long contemplated. It was time, she realized, to make her stand, to share her truth. The fire crackled in agreement. Tomorrow, she would reveal her decision, one that would echo through the halls of Olympus and beyond. Hestia awoke as the first light of dawn broke over Mount Olympus, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. The tranquility of the morning stood in stark contrast to the remnants of last night's festivities. She began her day, as she often did, by restoring order after the party. Stepping softly through the hallowed halls of Olympus, Hestia's gentle hands gathered the scattered remains of the night's revelry. Her path was lined with forgotten wine glasses and strewn garments, each a colorful testament to the carefree abandon of the gods. She moved with a quiet grace, her touch almost reverent as she righted each glass and folded every item of clothing left behind. As Hestia approached the great hall, the scale of the previous night's celebration became apparent. The grandeur of the hall, usually a beacon of celestial majesty, was now veiled in the aftermath of chaos. The once pristine marble floors were marred by the footprints of dancing deities, and the walls, which echoed the laughter and music of countless ages, now bore witness to a night of unrivaled jubilation. The great hall, with its high ceilings and towering columns, was strewn with remnants of the feast. Tables lay askew, some still laden with the leftovers of ambrosial feasts and nectarian drinks. Banners and streamers hung limply, their magic waning with the coming of dawn. In the center of the hall, the hearth, Hestia's sacred domain, stood untouched and serene, a stark contrast to the disarray surrounding it. Its steady flame burned quietly, offering a silent homage to its goddess. As Hestia tidied the great hall, her attention was drawn to a peculiar rhythmic sound. It sounded like snoring. Intrigued, she followed the noise. The snoring grew louder, punctuated occasionally by softer, more delicate yawns that seemed almost musical in comparison. Nearing one of the long tables, draped in a cloth as blue as the sea, Hestia noticed a curious scene. The tablecloth stirred gently, a telltale sign of life beneath. She reached out, gently lifted the edge, and peered underneath. There, in a tangle of limbs and loosely draped linens, lay Poseidon, god of the sea, and one of Hestia's brothers. Surrounding him were several nymphs, their forms curled in sleep, their expressions peaceful. The sight of her brother, tangled in sleep with the beautiful creatures, brought a knowing smile to Hestia's lips. As she watched, Poseidon stirred. His eyes blinking opened at the dim light of dawn filtering into the hall. Catching sight of Hestia, he mumbled groggily, "You missed quite the party." Hestia, with a gentle shake of her head and a smile still playing on her lips, replied softly, "I believe I missed nothing that would bring me joy." Her voice was a quiet reminder of her choice, a path so vastly different from those of her siblings, yet perfect in its own right. She lowered the tablecloth, leaving Poseidon to his dreams. As she straightened up, the sound of commanding footsteps echoed through the hall. Zeus, the king of the gods and Hestia's youngest sibling, entered the great hall. His presence was like a storm, powerful and impossible to ignore. He surveyed the aftermath of the night with an amused twinkle in his eye before his gaze fell upon Hestia. "Ah, Hestia, ever the diligent one," Zeus said with a warm, brotherly tone. "We are blessed to have you to restore order to our wild festivities." Hestia offered a respectful nod, the corners of her lips curling into a small, serene smile. "Thank you, Zeus. But there is something I must discuss with you, and it cannot wait any longer." Zeus's brow arched, a spark of curiosity lighting his eyes. "Of course, Hestia. What weighs on your mind?" "It's a matter I wish to announce to all," Hestia stated, her voice steady and resolute. Understanding the gravity of her words, Zeus turned and called out, "Hermes!" In a blink, Hermes, the swift-footed messenger god, appeared. His youthful face was alight with curiosity, sensing the unusual seriousness in the air. "Hermes, spread the word. Hestia has an announcement to make, one that requires the attention of all on Olympus," Zeus commanded. With a swift nod and a mischievous grin, Hermes vanished, his speed a blur, to carry out Zeus's command. As Hermes darted away, the hall began to buzz with anticipation. It was rare for Hestia, the quiet and contemplative goddess, to call for such a gathering. Whispers and speculations swirled among the gods like leaves in a tempest. What could Hestia, the embodiment of hearth and home, have to declare that warranted such urgency? Hestia stood calmly amidst the growing excitement, her inner strength a stark contrast to the frenzy of conjecture. Her decision, nurtured in the depths of her soul, was ready to be revealed, marking the beginning of a new chapter in the tapestry of Olympus. Soon the great hall was filled. All 12 Olympian gods were in attendance. They settled into their seats, their eyes fixed on Hestia, who stood with a serene yet commanding presence. Hera, ever the epitome of grace and understanding, looked on with supportive eyes, while Demeter's expression betrayed a hint of skepticism, still unable to fully grasp her sister's need for an urgent meeting. Poseidon and Hades, who had always known Hestia's spirit, nodded in silent understanding of what was to come. Even Zeus, the mighty ruler of Olympus, awaited her words with a sense of respect and anticipation. When Hestia spoke, her voice, though soft, echoed powerfully in the hallowed hall. Today, I declare my vow of virginity and independence, she began, her words resonating with a strength that belied her quiet demeanor. This vow is not born from a disdain for marriage or family, but from a deep desire to be a unifying force, a constant flame that binds the homes and hearts of all, divine and mortal alike. Her declaration was met with a mixture of surprise, admiration, and in some cases, confusion. Hera approached Hestia, her eyes warm with newfound understanding. "Sister, your choice is brave and noble," she said, her voice tinged with respect. Demeter, though still somewhat perplexed, offered a smile of reluctant admiration. Zeus rose to his feet, his presence commanding the attention of all. "Hestia, your decision is a testament to your strength and dedication. As king of the gods, I hereby honor and uphold your vow." His words cemented her choice, granting it a sacred weight. In the moment of solemnity that followed, Zeus's eyes sparkled with a familiar, mischievous glint. He cleared his throat, a grand smile spreading across his face. And what better way to honor such a profound vow than with a celebration, he announced with a booming voice that echoed through the hall. The gods, ever eager for mirth and revelry, erupted into a chorus of cheers and laughter. The irony of celebrating Hestia's vow of solitude and peace with a boisterous party was not lost on them, but the allure of another festivity was too enticing to resist. Amidst the growing excitement, Hestia stood, a gentle smile on her lips, her eyes twinkling with amusement. She appreciated the sentiment, even if the form it took was humorously at odds with the nature of her vow. The gods, in their characteristic fashion, began to chatter and plan, their voices a cacophony of enthusiasm and suggestions. Wine flowed once more, and the hall, just moments ago a scene of serene declaration, transformed back into a hub of divine jubilation. Hestia watched the scene unfold, her heart filled with a quiet, unwavering peace. The contrast between her path and the ways of her fellow gods was stark, yet there was beauty in this diversity, in the tapestry of characters and choices that made up the pantheon of Olympus. As the party preparations began, Hestia's presence remained a calming force, a reminder of the balance between celebration and tranquility, between the boisterous joy of the gods and the serene flame of the hearth she guarded so dearly. The newly convened party at Mount Olympus was in full swing, a whirlwind of laughter, music, and dance. Amidst this spectacle of divine celebration stood Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry, his presence like a beacon of unrestrained joy. His laughter rang out, mingling with the clinking of glasses and the rhythmic beats of lyres and drums. Dionysus, with his carefree spirit and infectious charisma, had become a familiar, albeit unofficial, fixture at Olympian feasts. His arrival was always heralded by a surge in energy, a shift towards wilder, more jubilant festivities. Though not an Olympian god by title, his influence was undeniable. His ability to enchant and delight the gods was a testament to his unique power. As Dionysus moved through the crowd, the gods were drawn to him like moths to a flame. His cup never seemed to empty, the wine within as enchanting as the god who offered it. With each sip, the deities found themselves lost in euphoria, the worries of their divine lives melting away in the face of Dionysus's vivacity. In a moment of heightened merriment, Dionysus raised his voice above the din, his words bold and clear. "My fellow gods, how I long to be one of you, to officially stand among the revered Olympians." This declaration, bold and unexpected, rippled through the crowd, sparking a mixture of reactions. Some gods, caught up in the spirit of the party, cheered at the idea, their voices a chorus of encouragement. But others, like Hera and Zeus, exchanged glances that spoke of the complexities of such a proposal. "The Council of Olympians is limited to 12, Zeus reminded the assembly, his voice echoing with the weight of tradition and order. Amidst the swirl of celebration, Hestia stood apart, her figure a silent, observing presence. Her eyes followed Dionysus with a thoughtful gaze. The sound of laughter, the sweet aroma of wine, the warmth of the dancing bodies around her, all of it felt distant, as if she were a spectator to a world she only partially belonged to. Hestia's thoughts wandered inward. She pondered her place among the gods, her role as the guardian of the hearth. While she held a position of respect and significance, her nature often left her on the fringes of these grandiose gatherings. Is my seat among the Olympian 12 essential to my purpose? She questioned silently, her heart seeking an answer in the quiet spaces of her soul. As Dionysus continued to be the life of the party, his laughter echoing like a melody of freedom, Hestia's contemplation deepened. She considered the possibility of stepping aside, of allowing Dionysus, with his zest for life and his desire for inclusion, a place among the Olympians. Perhaps my essence, my true calling, lies beyond these hallowed halls, she mused. As the revelry at Mount Olympus roared on, a new figure made his entrance, adding a distinctly different flavor to the night's affairs. Priapus, the god of fertility, known for his brazen demeanor and singular focus on carnal pleasures, swaggered into the party. His presence was hard to miss, a blend of audacity and unabashed virility. Surveying the scene with keen interest, Priapus sidled up to one of the lesser gods, a playful yet sly smile playing on his lips. "What's the occasion for this grand celebration?" he inquired, his voice dripping with curiosity and a hint of mischief. The lesser god, slightly taken aback by Priapus's sudden appearance, replied, "It's in honor of Hestia's recent vow of chastity and independence. She has chosen a life of solitude over marriage and romance." Priapus's eyebrows shot up in surprise, his grin widening. "Hestia? Now, that's a surprise," he exclaimed. Then, with a chuckle, he added, "Such a waste of a pretty woman, but I bet I can sway her. No woman can resist the charm of Priapus. How can she deny the god of fertility and masculinity?" His words, though spoken in jest, carried his characteristic overconfidence, a belief in his irresistible allure that often bordered on comical. Priapus, with his single-minded view of the world, saw Hestia's vow not as a symbol of her strength and independence, but as a challenge to his own powers of seduction. Emboldened by his conviction and egged on by the laughter of those around him, Priapus set off through the crowd, determined to demonstrate his charm to Hestia. The gods watched with a mixture of amusement and disbelief as Priapus, ever the embodiment of masculine desire, made his way toward Hestia, fully intent on proving his point. Priapus, with his typical bravado, made his way across the hall toward Hestia. The goddess, her attention on the flickering flames of the hearth, seemed oblivious to the approaching god. Priapus, confident in his allure, leaned in with a roguish smile and began weaving his words, each laced with innuendo and suggestive jests. Dearest Hestia, surely a goddess of your beauty cannot truly desire a life of solitude. Allow me, the god of fertility, to show you the joys you're missing. Hestia, turning to face Priapus, regarded him with a calm, unimpressed gaze. Her composure remained unshaken, her response measured and firm. Priapus, your reputation precedes you, but it holds no sway here. My vow is my bond, and your words, no matter how craftily spun, will not alter my course. As this exchange unfolded, Dionysus, who had been observing from a distance, felt a surge of displeasure. He found Priapus's actions disrespectful and distasteful, especially in light of Hestia's recent, deeply personal vow. Moving with purpose, Dionysus approached the pair, his usual jovial expression replaced by one of concern. Priapus, I believe you've made your point, Dionysus interjected, his tone firm yet diplomatic. Turning to Hestia, he asked with genuine concern, Is he bothering you, Hestia? Hestia, appreciative of Dionysus's intervention, but still very much in control of the situation, replied, Thank you, Dionysus, but I can handle Priapus. It seems he fails to understand that some choices are made out of strength, not weakness. Priapus, caught off guard by Dionysus's interruption and Hestia's unwavering stance, could only offer a sheepish grin in response. The encounter served to highlight not only Hestia's resilience and dignity, but also Dionysus's sense of respect and understanding of boundaries, qualities that were often overshadowed by his more hedonistic pursuits. As Priapus retreated, the gods around them resumed their festivities, but the moment left a lasting impression. Hestia's strength and Dionysus's unexpected show of support painted a picture of mutual respect and depth of character, often unseen amidst the Olympian revelries. Hestia, observing Dionysus's intervention and the respect he showed, felt a profound realization dawn within her. Dionysus, often seen merely as the god of wine and revelry, possessed a depth and understanding that went beyond his festive facade. In that moment, Hestia saw him not just a deity of mirth, but a being truly worthy of a place among the Olympian gods. Approaching Dionysus, Hestia spoke with a sincerity that mirrored the gravity of her thoughts. Dionysus, your actions today have shown a wisdom and respect that befits an Olympian. I have been contemplating my role among our kind, and I believe you are more suited for the position I hold. I offer to relinquish my seat in your favor. Dionysus, taken aback by her proposition, immediately protested. Hestia, I could never dream of taking your place. Your role, your presence among us is irreplaceable. Hestia, however, remained resolute. It is not about being replaced, Dionysus. It is about fulfilling our true purposes. My path lies elsewhere, and your energy and compassion are what Olympus needs now. Seeing that the conversation required a more formal setting and the attention of all, Hestia stepped onto a nearby table, the action itself drawing the eyes of the gathered gods. With a fork in hand, she gently clinked it against her glass, the clear, ringing sound cutting through the din of the party. Gradually, the hall fell silent, every eye turning towards her with curiosity and expectation. Standing tall amidst the hushed crowd, Hestia prepared to make her announcement, a declaration that would reshape the very fabric of the Olympian hierarchy. Her heart was steady, her resolve clear. This was a moment of change, not just for her, but for all the gods of Olympus. Dionysus, I have come to a decision, she began, her voice imbued with a serene certainty. I wish to step down from my seat among the Olympians. My purpose extends beyond these walls, to a realm where I can serve as the guardian of hearth and home in its truest form. Zeus, taken aback by this unforeseen turn of events, summoned the Olympian gods to a private chamber. The air was thick with a mix of surprise, speculation, and a profound sense of change. As they settled into the sacred space, a hush fell over the assembly, all eyes on Zeus. Zeus, the king of the gods, stood with a gravity that matched the importance of the moment. We stand at a crossroads, he began, his voice echoing with the weight of history and authority. Hestia has made a decision that is unprecedented in our history. Her dedication to her role as the guardian of hearth and home has been unwavering, and now she seeks to pass this mantle to Dionysus. The chamber was silent as Zeus pondered, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his divine brethren. After careful deliberation, I have decided to honor Hestia's request. Dionysus will join our council, bringing with him a new perspective and vitality. The gods, absorbing the magnitude of this decision, responded with a mix of emotions. Some were visibly surprised, others nodded in support, understanding the depth and sincerity behind Hestia's choice. With the decision made, Zeus led the gods back to the party, where the atmosphere was electric with anticipation, as Zeus announced the change. Hestia, stepping forward, addressed the assembly. Her voice, though soft, carried a power that resonated through the hall. My dear family and friends, I am grateful for the years I have spent among you as an Olympian, but my journey now takes a new path. one that will allow me to serve in a different, yet equally important way. Her speech was heartfelt, touching the hearts of all present. Dionysus, visibly moved and humbled, accepted his new role. I vow to honor this position with the same passion and joy that I bring to all aspects of life, he declared, his voice strong and filled with genuine emotion. This marked the beginning of a new era for the Olympian gods, a blend of tradition and renewal. Hestia's legacy as the goddess of the hearth endured, her influence felt in every warm and welcoming home, in every flame that flickered in the darkness. She remained a symbol of stability, her strength not in loud declarations, but in quiet conviction and unwavering dedication to her principles. Hestia, whose choice to step down was not an end, but a new beginning, a testament to the enduring power of quiet strength and selfless dedication. Hello, and welcome to Soothing Pod's Sleep Stories. My name is Arif, and tonight I will be your guide as we embark on a journey to a sleepy forest village in ancient Greece. There, we will spend some time with Arachne, a wonderfully talented weaver, as she creates stunning works of art that show people the beauty of the world and the land around them. We will join her on her weaving journey as her confidence grows, perhaps even as her confidence grows a bit too much. Our story begins deep within the countryside of ancient Greece in a peaceful, calm village. The houses of the village were peppered throughout the vast and lush forest, a forest teeming with life and teeming with inspiration. It was at the edge of this forest that a young baby girl named Arachne was born. The home she was born into was a modest one, a cozy farmhouse where the hearth crackled day and night, filling the room and the hearts of its inhabitants with warmth and comfort. Just outside the light, airy windows of the home lay a sheep field. It was lush and vast, a place where the sheep could run and play, living their lives the way that nature intended for them. There were low bushes teeming with berries and fresh, crunchy leaves, a healthy meal that made the sheep in this field some of the most healthy and carefree in the entire world. Arachne's father, Idmon of Colophon, was known far and wide across Greece. He was a successful shepherd and, not only that, a successful dyer in purple. People traveled from across the land to buy wool that had been dyed by him, dyed in many beautiful hues from a bright crimson to a dark purple. In the mornings, he would often take young Arachne with him to gather plants, flowers, and berries, some of which were used in the dyeing process. As they walked, he would talk to Arachne about the beauty of the land, about how well the land provided for them. Arachne would listen and smile, soaking in every word her father said. He talked about the wool they made and dyed like it was sacred, and in a way, it was. It was the family's lifeline, their pride and joy. And when Arachne looked at it, she understood just how true that was. It was simply beautiful, breathtaking even. Sometimes as a young girl, she would sit and run her fingers over the wool, smiling to herself as she did so. It was so soft to the touch, so comforting, and the hues that they dyed it were elevated reflections of the world around them. They were the deepest violet, the brightest purples, the richest and vibrant crimson and red that anyone had ever seen. Arachne would stare at them for hours, blending them together in her mind and painting pictures with the fresh wool. And soon, Arachne was able to do just that. At a young age, her mother taught her how to weave. The first time Arachne sat beside the fire and weaved was a moment that would change the course of her life. With every movement she made, with every loop of the wool, she felt like she had found her life's purpose. It was like she was truly connected to the world and to herself for the very first time. Her mother and father gazed at her in awe as she wove intricate works of art. It was like a new language that she was speaking, a language that very few people were fluent in. Arachne found a joy unlike any other as she wove her designs with the wool from her family's farm. Soon, it became all Arachne wanted to do. She would awaken in the morning, just before the sun had risen. There was always a chill in the air, a brisk bite to it that promised her that new discoveries were on the horizon, that there were things to explore, and that there was magic in the day ahead. She would shrug the covers off of herself and greet the day with a smile. In the winter, she'd stoke the fire, preparing it for the day ahead, and then head straight out into the fields to collect what she needed for the day. Often, she'd pay respects to the sheep, running her fingers over their wool and speaking to them in loving tones, thanking them for what they provided her family and the world with. Then, as the mist was still clinging to the hillsides and shrouding the mountains, she would go on the hunt for berries and flowers. She'd collect them in a wooden basket, piling them up in a vibrantly colored mound. Just as the sun began to crest over the trees, she would begin to head back home. The sun splashed vibrant oranges, golds, and reds across the green grass, illuminating the landscape in a heavenly glow. And that glow, that brilliant, warm light of the sun, meant that it was bright enough for Arachne to weave. She'd hand her morning bounty to her father, kiss him on the cheek, and scurry off to the place she had created behind the house. A perfect, cozy little spot for her to weave all day long. It was tucked behind the house in the center of a peaceful clearing, a place where she could feel in touch with nature, and therefore more in touch with her inspiration and the love within herself. All day long she would weave there, letting her inspiration guide her, creating art piece after art piece without an end in sight. Some days she would create them with specific people in mind, or she would create art pieces that would sell well to the general public. But normally, as the day went on, she was happy to slip into a place of dreams, a place where she would weave whatever her heart desired. When she was weaving, it simply felt like breathing to her. It was an extension of herself that she was creating. It didn't take long for people around Greece to hear of Arachne's art. It wasn't just her parents who thought her art was remarkable. It was everyone who saw it. Many of them had never seen woven fabric that detailed, that intricate, and beautifully designed. People flooded the farm to buy her work and to give her compliments, and Arachne was far from prepared for such fanfare. She went from being a young girl living peacefully on her parents' farm to being a celebrity of sorts. It was overwhelming for a young girl like Arachne, who had lived a rather secluded life, but there was part of her that enjoyed it. She had never thought her artwork was special, nor had she ever thought of it as a gift, no matter how many times her parents told her it was. Now, with so many people telling her she was talented, Arachne got quite an ego boost. She got a much more confident air about her when she was weaving, and when she sold her work, she was able to sell it for a much higher price. She let the compliments get to her head, and soon she was acting entirely too proud. But as her pride grew, so did the beauty of her work. It became so beautiful that nearby nymphs would emerge from the forest and the streams and cross through the fields to see her work. They would gather at night when Arachne was tucked away in bed, and they would discuss her work. They would touch it and inspect it, trying to imagine how it was possible for anyone to create art so beautiful. When Arachne worked, they would pop out of the woods and watch her. Arachne could feel them watching her, and often she would even offer them a smile and invite them closer. She liked that the nymphs admired her work so greatly, and truly, it wasn't just her work that they admired. It was the way she looked while she worked. She was so graceful, and there were such fluid, beautiful motions in her weaving. It was like she was painting with her body, with the tips of her fingers. Every step of her process, from carding the wool to weaving the shuttle along the loom, was like watching poetry in motion. It inspired wonder and awe in everyone who watched her. One nymph in particular was mesmerized by Arachne's weaving. She dreamed of Arachne one day teaching her how to weave, and so, in an effort to gain her trust and compliment her, she told her something she wholeheartedly believed. She told Arachne that it seemed like the goddess Athena herself had taught Arachne how to weave. To almost anyone, this would have been a compliment. Athena was a great goddess, and one thing she was the goddess of was the arts, like weaving. But Arachne had more pride in her work than anyone else. She was upset with the suggestion that Athena had taught her. She scoffed at the nymph, saying loud and proud, "Let Athena try her skill against mine." Athena was not a goddess to be tested. In fact, none of the gods or goddesses were to be tested. They were all vain beings, beings that would never put up with being outshined or seen as lesser than by any mere mortal. Saying something like what had come out of Arachne's mouth would put you in instant danger. And, unfortunately for Arachne, Athena was nearby the day she dared to utter this. She had been hunting in the nearby woods, as she did many days, and when she heard this proclamation, she was immediately displeased. Athena was much more forgiving and understanding than the other gods, however, and as such, she decided to give Arachne another chance. Deep within the woods, the goddess put on a disguise. She ran her hands over herself, and in a flash of magic and wonder, she was transformed into an elderly woman. She had a hunchback and carried a large cane. The wrinkles crisscrossing her face told ancient stories, and she knew the disguise was so convincing that no soul would be able to see through it. She hobbled through the woods, completely sinking into the role she had given herself. As she approached Arachne working, she felt a sense of frustration wash over her. Indeed, Arachne was skilled, but certainly no more skilled than her, a goddess. In her disguise, Athena walked up to Arachne. She extended a wrinkled hand to her and placed it on her shoulder. She said in a crackling voice,
"I hope you shall not deny my advice. You are talented and may challenge mortals as you deem fit, but you certainly cannot compete with a goddess like Athena. I advise you to ask for her forgiveness. She is the most merciful of the gods, and if you are lucky, she may forgive you."
Arachne stared at the old woman for a long moment. She shrugged the woman's hand off herself and chimed, with utter confidence, "I am not afraid of the goddess. Let her try her skill against mine, if she so dares." Athena had been patient and understanding with the mortal, but such a direct, unmistakable challenge could not be ignored by Athena. Frustrated and knowing what she must do next, Athena shrugged off her disguise. The mortals that gathered nearby to watch Arachne work gasped in shock as a shimmer of magic surrounded the old woman. When the disguise faded away like a dream, Athena stood in the old woman's place. She donned her armor and her helmet, as well as a tense, focused expression that sent chills down everyone's spine. Everyone dropped to their knees and bowed to the goddess. It was so rare to be in the presence of a goddess, let alone one as powerful and remarkable as Athena herself. Arachne, however, did not bow, nor did she take a knee for Athena. She stared at Athena in a daze, her jaw hanging slightly ajar, her eyes wide with surprise. The only thing she could utter in a low, surprised whisper was, "She came." Not much else needed to be said. It was clear what had to take place. Athena and Arachne stood on the sidelines as townspeople scurried to set up a loom for each of them. Arachne's confidence had been shaken for a moment as she gazed upon Athena in all of her glory. But as soon as she saw the loom being assembled, her confidence began to grow once more. Weaving was like breathing to her. It was what she had been born to do, and it was something that she truly believed she was better than Athena at. She didn't regret those words she had spoken. She only hoped that she could outperform Athena like she felt she could. The two stood before their looms. There was plenty of wool for them to weave, enough for them to make immaculate, breathtaking works of art, unlike anything the world had ever seen. They stared at each other across the clearing, both of them buzzing with anticipation and with the deep, deep desire to create that flowed through their veins. There was no marker to start the competition. No one waved a flag or said any words. The two simply gave each other a confident nod and dug their hands into the wool. With that, the competition began. Both of them slipped into what looked like a trance. They were creating. They were living and breathing the art that they were weaving on the loom. They worked with such speed and perfection that the audience couldn't believe what they were seeing. Their hands were moving so quickly on the loom that they seemed to blur, and the colors coming together on what had become their canvas blended together into what looked like a painting. Arachne did not feel pressure as she created. Even in a moment as tense as the ones she found herself in, weaving was like breathing to her. Her hands and fingers worked tirelessly, dancing and fluttering over the loom with incredible precision. Across the way, Athena did the same. However, Athena was buzzing with frustration, with anger. She hated to do things like this to mortals, but she felt she had to keep them in line to protect her reputation as a goddess. And truly, Arachne had been asking for it by speaking of the goddess the way that she had been. The sun made its way across the sky as the women worked. As it crept from its highest point towards the horizon, it splashed the art with an array of colors, changing it as it streaked across the sky and, in a sense, making it come alive. Soon, the competition was nearing its end. The audience could see both of the women slowing. The colors stopped blurring, and the beautiful painting they had created slowly began to come to light. It was Athena who stepped away and put her hands up first. She smiled at the work she had created, knowing in her heart that it was some of the finest art the world had ever seen. And she was right. Her piece was so intricate that some people began to tear up at the sight of it. It was a detailed rendition of her and Poseidon fighting for the patronage of Athens. With his trident, it looked as if Poseidon was stabbing the earth, drawing an explosion of saltwater spring that gushed from the depths of the earth. The depiction of it was so realistic that it looked like seawater was emerging from the painting. A few people dared to even walk up to it and brush their fingers over it to see if it really was just wool. Along the edges of the weave, Athena had placed an olive tree. The olive tree looked like a living, breathing tree, like its branches were wrapping around the outside of the weave and embracing it. People swore they could smell the freshness of the leaves as they leaned into the work of art. And then, in the center of the weave, there was imagery that was far from subtle. There were images of mortals who had challenged the gods, mortals who had fallen on a terrible fate because of it. There was Icarus falling after flying too close to the sun, Salmoneus being tormented in Tartarus, and several other mortals being punished for disobeying the gods. People in the audience stepped away from the weave when they noticed this. It made their stomachs churn, not only because of the message, but because of how detailed it was. When Arachne stepped away from her finished work, she did it with a smile on her face and pride coursing through her. But that pride would be short-lived, because when Athena saw what she had created, the contest was immediately over. Arachne's weaving depicted ways that the gods, particularly Zeus, had misled and abused mortals, tricking and seducing many women. There was an image of Europa holding onto a bull in the challenging waves as Zeus drove them to Crete. There was an image of Leda brushing her fingers over the swan which Zeus had transformed himself in. The images were so lifelike, with waves and feathers that seemed to move. The audience knew things were about to take a turn for the worse, and almost immediately they did. After seeing Arachne's tapestry, Athena flew into a rage. She couldn't believe a mortal would dare to create imagery like Arachne had. She put her hands on Arachne's head, filling it and her whole body with deep feelings of shame and hatred for herself. Disheartened, Arachne ran from her workshop. Later that day, Arachne was found dead, killed by her shame and guilt. Athena thought of Arachne's work. It had been beautifully done, even if the subject matter had been an insult. The world did deserve to see such beauty. Impulsively, she struck Arachne, commanding her to live. With her touch, Arachne was transformed into the very first spider. Arachne scurried up the tree and began to make webs in the branches overhead, weaving intricate rows of her silk. Athena watched, pleased with herself, and told Arachne that her and all her descendants would learn from this lesson forever. They would weave and weave and weave every day of their lives, thinking deeply about what they'd done. Arachne spent the rest of her days doing just that. She spent her time weaving just as she had when she was still a human. Her webs were like works of art, and every day people gathered to see them. To this day, spiders scuttle into trees and corners of buildings to create, just as they have been commanded to do. If you look closely, you can see the beauty and skill in their work. Beauty and skill that has been passed down from their ancestor, passed down from Arachne. Welcome to Soothing Pod's Sleep Stories. I am Arif, and if you are here today to listen to a dreamy story that will soothe you and comfort you, you are in the right place. Tonight, I will tell you a story about how the goddess Athena taught Medusa a very important lesson about what it means to be beautiful. The story of Athena and Medusa began a long time ago in ancient Greece. Ancient Greece was unlike the world that we know today. Back then, winged horses, one-eyed cyclops, and other strange creatures roamed the earth. Men believed that gods and goddesses who lived in Mount Olympus ruled the earth. The gods and goddesses in ancient Greece always got involved in the affairs of men. They showed themselves and talked to mortal men face to face. They looked like us, except they were immortal. Other than this, the most significant difference between the mortals and gods is that they had magical abilities. The gods had the power to control the sun, the moon, the waters, and everything else that you can think about. The gods often used these powers to help, and sometimes punish the people they ruled over. It was then that a beautiful girl named Medusa lived in a city called Athens. The bustling town was home to many lovely and charming women, but of all these women, Medusa was the most beautiful. She had long, shiny, golden hair that reached her waist, and her face was smooth like fine porcelain. Her face was so perfect that it rivaled that of the gods and goddesses. Men came from faraway places just to get a glimpse of her beauty. Medusa was lovely, and she knew it. But instead of being thankful for her gift of beauty and using it for good, she was arrogant of the fact that she was stunning. Not a single day passed that she didn't remind everybody of this. One Sunday, while she was buying flour from the village miller, she boasted about how beautiful she was. "Miller, this flour is fresh and white, but it's nothing compared to my skin. My skin is fresher and whiter than that of the first snow," she said. The miller heaved a sigh, rolled his eyes, and went back to work. He was tired of hearing Medusa talk about how beautiful she was. Medusa's bragging didn't end there. She bragged to the cobbler that her blonde hair glowed brighter than the sun. She told the blacksmith that her eyes were greener than the most exquisite emeralds. And she boasted to everyone within earshot in the public gardens that her lips put the reddest roses to shame. There was no end to her arrogance. When Medusa wasn't busy sharing her thoughts with anyone about how beautiful she was, they would find her looking and admiring her reflection in the mirror. In the mornings, she would spend hours admiring herself in her hand mirror as she brushed every strand of her long, golden hair. "There is nobody more beautiful than you. Not even the goddesses compare to your beauty," she said as she pursed her lips and made kissing motions to herself. At night, she would close the windows and look at her reflection in the darkened mirror for an hour before she got tired and went to sleep. Medusa would take any opportunity that came her way to either talk about or admire herself. She became so self-absorbed that she didn't care about the surrounding people anymore. She could no longer carry out tasks her parents asked her to do without forgetting what it was she was going to do when she was looking at herself. One time, her mother asked her to take some water from the nearby well. Medusa obeyed her mother, but she took too long to admire her reflection in the well, and she forgot to fetch the water. "I'm sorry, Mother, but I forgot to take the water. But aren't you proud that you have such a lovely daughter like me?" she said to her mother without an ounce of guilt. All her mother could do was sigh. She didn't know what else to do with her daughter. Every day, she prayed to the gods, to the goddess Athena, the patron of the city of Athens, to help her daughter be humbler. One day, Medusa's closest friends, who took care of the Parthenon, invited her to visit the temple with them. Medusa was very excited because this would be her first time to visit the famous temple. But more than visiting the temple, she was looking forward to showing off her beauty to the people who went there. Later that night, Medusa asked her parents' permission to go with her friends to see the Parthenon. It thrilled her parents when they heard that their daughter was taking an interest in some other things other than herself, and they agreed right away. Perhaps the goddess had listened to their prayers. You should see the pantheon that the great Pericles constructed. It thrills your mother and me that you've taken an interest in the goddess Athena, her father said. To appease and not go into another argument with her parents, Medusa nodded in agreement. But what she didn't tell them is that she didn't care about the goddess Athena. Medusa only cared that she would show other people how beautiful she was. Medusa woke up even before the rooster crowed the next morning. She went to her closet and wore the fanciest and most expensive clothes that she owned, brushed her long hair, and put on her best hair clips. In her excitement, she didn't spend that much time admiring herself in front of the mirror, like she usually did every morning. She bid her parents goodbye and went off to meet her friends. When she and her friends arrived at the temple, she couldn't help but stare in awe at how big and wonderful the temple was. Medusa, I'm not sure if you're interested or not, but the Parthenon has 46 columns on the outside and 18 on the inside. It was Ceres, her friend said to her. Thank you, but I need not know how many columns are inside this temple, Medusa said, as she interrupted her friend. Ceres, instead of telling me about the temple, why don't you tell me about how I look? She asked her friend as she twirled around to give her friend the full effect. You look lovely, as usual, her friend Ceres replied. We will leave you here while we attend to some more important temple duties. Please look around and explore the temple. We will find you once we finish with our duties. Medusa's friend said as she went off with the other caretakers to attend to their duties. Medusa walked around the temple, aware of the fact that people were looking at her everywhere she went. She knew that they were admiring her, so she strolled so that people could admire her better. I am inside the goddess Athena's temple, yet people are looking at me instead of her. That just proves that I am more beautiful than she is, she thought to herself. The Parthenon was full of sculptures and artworks dedicated to the goddess Athena. The most talented artists in Athens made these in Athena's honor. When Medusa walked by a sculpture of Athena, she whispered that she would have made a better subject for the piece. This is exquisite, but it would have been better if the sculptor made a statue of me instead. She thought the same thing when she passed by a painting of Athena. The painter did a great job because the goddess has very bushy eyebrows, she scoffed. I have perfectly shaped eyebrows. It's a shame that the painter didn't know me before. Otherwise, he would have painted me instead. He would have had a better masterpiece. On and on she went about every single piece of art and statue that adorned the temple, until she found herself in the center of the temple, where the 40-foot sculpture of Athena known as the Athena Parthenos stood majestically. The famous Greek sculptor Phidias made the statue. He sculpted the figure out of wood and covered it with gold and ivory. The statue showed Athena wearing armor and an aegis, a goatskin shield. On her right hand, she held a statue of the Greek goddess Nike. On her left hand, she carried a shield. Engraved on her shield were various battle scenes. On her helmet, a sphinx and 2 griffins stood, and a giant snake coiled behind her shield. The statue was grand and exquisite, just like the goddess Athena. It impressed everybody who came to see the statue, except Medusa. The temple is beautiful. It's such a shame that it's built and wasted on Athena. I'm sure even the gods will agree that I am more beautiful than she. Maybe one day people will build an even bigger and better temple dedicated to my extraordinary beauty. What she had said shocked her friends and temple priestesses working within earshot. Of all the years they worked in the temple, they knew that the goddess Athena took particular interest in the Parthenon and listened to everything said inside. They also knew that the goddess did not like being compared to anyone else. They had seen the powerful goddess when she got angry, and they knew that it wasn't the best idea to irritate her. Seeing that Medusa was their friend, they tried to help her by making her take back what she had said. Athena was kind and merciful, so they were sure that the goddess would forgive Medusa. Surely you don't mean that. Take back what you said before the goddess gets angry at you, Ceres said to her. Why should I take back what I have said when it is the truth? Medusa asked in disbelief. She turned towards the statue of Athena and said in a loud, arrogant voice, I wish that the goddess would appear before me, so that everyone in this temple will know that I, Medusa, am more beautiful than her. Just then, a blinding light filled the temple. When the bright light receded, the goddess Athena, in all her glory, stood before her. Medusa trembled at the sight of the mighty goddess. She looked around the temple for somebody to help her, but she was all alone. Her friends and the other temple visitors all ran out in fright at the sight of the goddess. My name is Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom. I have heard all that you have said in my temple. Although being beautiful is a gift, it is fleeting. However, kindness and pureness of heart never grow old. If you repent and reflect upon what I have said, I will be merciful and forgive you. The goddess said to her in a soft but authoritative voice. Despite the goddess's offer, her arrogance overcame Medusa, and she said, "You are saying these because you are just jealous of my beauty. It is clear as day that even if I'm mortal, I am more beautiful than you." Athena was silent for a few seconds, and then she spoke in a sad voice. My dear child, there are things that are more important than physical beauty. You should also take care of what is inside. I could strike you down, but I have heard all your mother's prayers, and so I will be merciful to you. You will become what you are inside, ugly and monstrous. As soon as the goddess said these words, Medusa transformed. Where her long, beautiful hair once was, snakes grew. Scales covered her once clear and porcelain skin. Anyone who looks at you will turn into stone, and nothing can save them from that. Even you, my dear Medusa, should you want to look at your reflection, will turn to stone the moment you see your face, Athena said as she looked on. Medusa was shocked at how she looked, scaly skin and snakes for hair. She cried and pleaded with the goddess to change her back, but it was too late. I will not be heartless, and you will not be alone in your current state. Starting today, I will send you to live with the Gorgon sisters at the ends of the earth. There, you cannot harm anybody, and you will have time to think about the things you have done, the goddess continued. And with that, Medusa and the goddess disappeared from the temple, leaving only a trail of smoke. When Medusa's friends found the courage to return to the temple, they found only the hairpin that Medusa was wearing when she came with them to the Parthenon. They searched for her, but she was nowhere to be found. The turn of events saddened her parents, but they hoped that one day Medusa would realize the error of her ways. They hoped that the goddess would be merciful and return her to them. The story of Medusa is a reminder that kindness and pureness of heart are things that grow more beautiful as the years pass by. A pretty face can be gone just like the wind. Hello, and welcome to Soothing Pod Sleep Stories. My name is Arif, and tonight I will be your guide as we embark on a journey to ancient Greece, where we will follow the fair, beautiful goddess of love, Aphrodite, as she makes her way through a world of magic to find a love of her own. It was early in the age of creation. The world, as expansive and wild as it was new and fresh, with caves, coastlines, and forests to be explored. A great war had been waged between the Titans and the gods, and in the end, the gods prevailed. In their great battle, the Titan Uranus was cast into the warm, beautiful waters off the coast of Cyprus. The cerulean waters churned against the coast, a mosaic of blue and white, mixed with effervescent foam that seemed to sparkle in whatever rays of light were cast down upon it. It was during a stormy day on the coast that locals gazed out in time to see something strange in their familiar waters. A golden light radiated from beneath the waves, making the whole of the ocean glow in an otherworldly shade. It was magic, they knew that much. But none of them could anticipate the true depth of what, or rather who, was about to emerge from their very sea. At first, all Aphrodite could see was the pillars of light spiraling down, down, down through the ocean waves, painting the sea floor in all manner of shadows and light. The sky was gray overhead, but to Aphrodite, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. They were plumes of gray and black and stone, layered on top of each other like pieces of fluffy cotton laid out on a mat of blue. She came into being all at once, unlike most. The thick sea foam frothing at the base of a rock just offshore was her birthplace, the spot where she sprung forth from the ocean against all odds. She was from Uranus, the most powerful Titan of all, and his power would not be lost on her. For when she rose up from the gathering sea foam, her form took the breath away from anyone who saw her. The curves of her body were like the canyons and valleys of the most fruitful vineyards, tucked back far in the mountains, where few got to witness the true treasure that they were. Her warm eyes radiated kindness and wisdom far beyond that of any mortal, and simply glancing into them would strike the heart of anyone who passed with longing. She was, without a doubt, the most beautiful being who had stepped foot onto the earth. And as she took her first step into the golden sand off the coast of Cyprus, she knew that she had finally arrived home after an eternity swirling in the unknown. The cliffs seemed to reach for those cloudy skies, nearly brushing against them with plumes of olive trees. The air smelled both fresh and wild. There was the briskness of the ocean, and at the same time, the homey scent of wood fires crackling and olives being pressed for oil in people's yards. She inhaled the scent deeply and found herself growing more and more comfortable with the bountiful world that she had been dropped into. Aphrodite was a goddess, and upon seeing her, everyone knew what she was the goddess of: beauty and love. A nearby woman cloaked her naked body in silk cloths upon her arrival, welcoming her to this brand new world. There was much for Aphrodite to see, and as the goddess of love, there was much, much out there for her to embrace. And though Aphrodite was a goddess, undoubtedly destined to sit upon a throne at Olympus with the others, she had no intentions to do so soon into her life. She decided that she would establish her life along these bright, breathtaking coastlines while she adjusted to what being alive truly meant for herself. And for quite some time, life was divine. She would awaken in the morning to the sound of the waves brushing against the edge of the sand. The steady rhythm of the waves would lull her back to sleep most mornings, but occasionally she would be able to resist. She'd open her amber eyes to gaze out upon the sea before her, and every morning it would utterly take her breath away. The way the sun painted the ocean in a mosaic of colors of orange, red, and pink, each one somehow more beautiful than the last. She would often lay there in her comfortable bed of fronds and cloth, gazing out over the water with hope in her mind and in her heart. There was no place that made her feel more at home than the ocean, and with every passing day, that feeling only grew. After she awakened in the mornings, she would generally take her time walking along the edge of the water. She would pick up every shell she managed to stumble across and turn them over in her hands to lovingly admire them. The ocean always seemed to give the best gifts to those who were patient and kind, though Aphrodite had no way of knowing that her greatest gift was yet to come. After gathering seashells, she would make her way to the local town. She was a spectacle of sorts there. In order to not distract everyone who laid eyes on her, she would often drape her hair in cloth, hiding her appearance as much as she could, while still feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. Some days it would work better than others, and yet, even when it didn't work, she was treated with the utmost kindness by the people of her fair town. She would go to the local market and gather whatever ingredients she wanted for her oceanside cooking that night. The merchants in their booths would often offer her breakfast or lunch for free, and some mornings she would oblige. She was a divine cook herself, and yet there was something magical about eating someone else's cooking. She swore she could feel the love and care infused in every bite, that she took. As time went on, that longing seemed to pull heavier on her. When she saw lovers in town, doting on each other and laughing with one another, she craved companionship, like the companionship that they had together. Being born from the foam of the sea, she wasn't quite a townsperson, and yet, having not taken a seat on Mount Olympus with the gods, she was not quite a goddess yet either. She was floating in between worlds with no one to share it with. That is, until one morning in the early weeks of summer. Like most mornings, she awakened to the sight of the sun rising up over the waves. She sat on the edge of her sleeping mat and watched in awe as the sun drifted up over the waves. Slowly, she bit into a ripe fig, savoring the sparkling flavor as it made its way over her lips and tongue. There was something especially promising about this morning, and it wasn't lost on Aphrodite in the slightest. As the sun crested up into the sky, Aphrodite rose to her feet. She wrapped herself a bit tighter in her silk robe, still shaking off the chill of the cool night air on the ocean. She watched as her dainty feet sunk into the sand, leaving a map of her travels chiseled from one end of the beach to the other. Gently, she picked up every beautiful shell that she came in contact with. Each one seemed more vibrant and beautiful than the last. And then she spotted a peculiar shell up ahead. It seemed to glow an iridescent blue and pink, shifting its sheen with every new ray of light that fell upon it. Her footsteps quickened as she made her way to the shell, eager to feel the smoothness of it in her palm. But just as her fingers were about to brush against it, someone else reached up to grab the shell. Aphrodite gasped and recoiled, nearly falling on her back in the sand. But the stranger reached out, taking her hand in his and reassuringly telling her that he wasn't going to let her fall. Aphrodite looked up to see who this man was, and as she did, she felt love strike her heart for the very first time. The man before her was coming from the waves, leaning up out of them like he was a god himself. His brown hair fell in perfect coils just above his eyebrows. Each one was drenched in seawater, and yet they retained their curls beautifully. Though his features were dark, cloaked in an air of debonair mystery, his eyes were as blue as the sea around him, almost as if they were part of it themselves. For a moment, Aphrodite was breathless. Then she managed to tell the stranger thank you. The two took a seat in the sand, each trying to catch their breath from the surprise encounter. The man picked up the beautiful shell and placed it in Aphrodite's palm with a warm smile. "I believe this belongs to you now," he purred. Aphrodite tucked her beautiful locks behind her ear and gathered the shell in both of her hands to get a closer look at it. To say it was breathtaking would be an understatement. It was like staring at the whole ocean in the palm of her hand. She thanked the stranger again, then coyly asked for his name. He introduced himself as Neretes, a sea deity who Aphrodite had heard whispers of in the nearby town. People seemed to love Neretes, lust for him even, but he was as elusive as a rainy day when you're praying for one. His eyes had a kindness and magic to them that Aphrodite had only seen in her own reflection. She smiled at Neretes and softly placed her hand in his own. His hands were unbelievably smooth and gentle, like rocks polished soft by the ocean, wearing on them day after day. Before she could introduce herself, Neretes chimed, "You must be Aphrodite, aren't you? The goddess who emerged from the sea." He said the words as if he was speaking about a fairy tale he had been told since he was a child. Aphrodite smiled. The instant that Neretes saw her smile, he knew he was in trouble. Her beauty, which was already radiant and all-consuming, now felt inescapable. He was drawn to her like the very waves that pulled him to the shoreline. The two walked along the beach together, talking about all manner of things. Sometimes they chatted about the weather. Other times they chatted about the beauty of the ocean and why they felt so drawn to it. Neretes asked Aphrodite if she was going to go to Mount Olympus with all the other gods and goddesses. But Aphrodite answered with a playful smile and a shrug of her shoulders, "I see no reason to go to Mount Olympus yet. Besides, there is so much beauty and life to explore down here." From then on, the two were inseparable. Many nights, Neretes would emerge from the waves to find Aphrodite in her makeshift home, warming herself at the edge of a fire. He would wrap his arms around her, comforting her and rocking her gently side to side as she drifted closer and closer to sleep. It was his favorite part of the day, every single day, and she felt the same. In his arms, she felt safe and appreciated in a way that she never had before. It was only in his touch that she realized how lonely she had truly been for quite some time. And she didn't feel that Neretes worshipped her for just the beauty of her body either. There was a softness and poetic nature to him that she found herself sinking into more and more every day. He often spoke of the things he liked about Aphrodite, and it was rarely focused on her appearance. He spoke of the way she made him laugh, of her appreciation for all things beautiful, of her gentleness and, when needed, her fierceness. She felt seen by Neretes, especially in those long hours by the seashore, long after the sun went down beyond the ocean blue. Their romance blossomed throughout the summer. They spent most mornings walking along the shore, picking up every beautiful seashell they could find so that Aphrodite could spirit them away to her house, where they adorned all of her shelves, creating a magical atmosphere. Their love was true, but things were far from perfect. When Neretes introduced Aphrodite to her family, his brothers, sisters, and parents, she wasn't particularly well liked. Neretes' family was tight-knit, but their feelings regarding the gods and goddesses that sat atop Mount Olympus were strained. The power of Aphrodite made them fearful, and in turn, they weren't particularly welcoming to Neretes' new love interest. It was a sting for Aphrodite, who wanted nothing but a family of her own to feel at home with. To her, it was becoming increasingly clear that the only home and family she would find would be on Mount Olympus, especially if Neretes' family continued to be unaccepting. She swallowed the thought, accepting that this is the way it was destined to be. But everything changed when Zeus came to her one day. Sitting along the seashore, his shadow cast over her, and instantly she could feel the god's power. He spoke to her with uncharacteristic kindness, telling her that she belonged on Mount Olympus with her family. She was a goddess, and without her, they were not whole. The feeling of belonging was strong with Aphrodite, and suddenly, something clicked within her. She wanted to go to Mount Olympus, to feel loved and accepted. But when she invited Neretes to join her, his reaction was not at all what she had been hoping. She dreamt of a life where they were united in power together. But Neretes had no desire for that. Instead, he wanted to stay with his family. Aphrodite begged Neretes to join her, promising that he would be able to return and see his family whenever he longed for them. But Neretes had no desire to go to Mount Olympus with her. Aphrodite was devastated. With that, she left her first love behind. It was a powerful lesson for Aphrodite, one that would remain with her all of her life. Her journey in romance was far from over, and there was much love to come in her life. In fact, without Neretes, she would have been lost when she encountered Ares for the very first time. Aphrodite's arrival on Mount Olympus was not without controversy and chit-chat. As the goddess of beauty, many deities were jealous of her. However, Aphrodite paid them no mind. After being lonely for so long, the only thing she truly wanted was companionship, and to enjoy the comfort of having family and friends who understood her power. Mount Olympus was the most beautiful place on earth, though she sometimes longed for the sprawling beaches of Cyprus. But in her heart, she knew Olympus is where she belonged. There were groves of fruitful trees as far as the eye could see, and buildings of marble and gold sprouted from the earth. as if the earth had been built around them. It was on Mount Olympus where Aphrodite encountered her second love. On the battlefield one day, Aphrodite caught sight of Ares, the god of war. From the moment she laid eyes on him, she felt a spark ignite deep inside her. There was an edge to Ares, a toughness that she knew few people could crack. And yet, when her eyes met his, she saw his facade fade away like a cliffside crumbling into the waves of the sea. There was a softness to this man, to this god of war, and in an instant, she knew that she needed to see more of it. While Ares and Eros taunted one another about their weapons, Aphrodite floated nearby, smiling to herself as she nonchalantly made her way through one of the many orchards near Mount Olympus. When the battle was finally over, she heard heavy footsteps making their way through the orchard. Without looking up, she knew who it was. "Did you win your battle, Ares? Or did Eros prove to be quite a match?" She chimed the words without turning to meet his eye. She could hear Ares stop in his tracks behind her, then chuckle, almost as if he was caught off guard. After all, many viewed Aphrodite as beautiful, but few knew the beauty and tact of her mind. "I couldn't lose a battle with someone as divine as you looking on, could I? That simply wouldn't do." His answer made her heart leap in her chest. She finally turned to him, and once more, there it was, that facade melting away, and the gentleness of Ares radiating from his soul once more. To many, Ares was arrogant, conceited, cold even. But just by looking at him, Aphrodite knew that he was so much more than that. The two made their way through the orchard, plucking apples from the trees in an attempt to see who could pick the largest. Ares was known for never losing a battle, nor a simple contest. And yet, somehow, Aphrodite managed to pluck the largest apple every single time. She smirked knowingly every time she came out on top, and Ares would simply sigh with a lovesick look in his eyes and coyly chime, "My, you must have some luck, Aphrodite." They began joining each other in the orchard every single day. No matter what Ares was wanted for, his afternoons in the orchard with Aphrodite took precedent. He found himself looking forward to his time with Aphrodite, unlike anything else. Seeing her smile made his heart sing, and every time she laughed or outwitted him, he could feel the warmth of her mind. They talked about all manner of things, and Aphrodite had a way of unfurling him that no one else did. For long hours, they would lay in the grass and bare their souls to one another. Aphrodite spoke of her loneliness, of the objectification she faced as the goddess of beauty, and of her desire to write her own destiny with her family close by. When she spoke of her struggles, Ares would take her by the hand and slowly rub the back of her palm, gazing at her with intent understanding. To the Greek gods, he was known for his courage, for his bloodlust, for the strength of his body. But with Aphrodite, none of that mattered. She cared for his heart, not his body or his mind. She had no desire for battle, and, in a way, she brought out that calm, neglected side in him. Often, Ares would wrap his strong arms around Aphrodite and nap with her in the sunshine at the base of their favorite tree. Sometimes, he would even mindlessly braid and comb Aphrodite's hair as they talked. Seeing such a softness in him made Aphrodite melt, and with each passing day, she found herself loving him even more deeply. With Aphrodite, Ares could be his true self, not the version of himself built to please the gods. For so long, the battlefield had been the only home he had known. But the lazy afternoons with Aphrodite under the apple trees were even more fulfilling. Many days, Aphrodite would kiss his cheeks and play with his hair, running her fingers through his plush curls as they chatted about poetry. Aphrodite had a fondness for art that Ares had never taken a liking to, and yet, hearing poetry tumble from her lips made him love it for the very first time. The two were well aware of how Mount Olympus was run. Marriage was rarely marriage of love, especially with Zeus in control. Aphrodite knew that no matter who she became betrothed to, no matter what marriage she was thrust into, Ares would be her forever love and her true love. In the garden, they would talk about this for hours on end. They would braid rings for one another, vowing to always carry their intense love for each other. No matter what chaos or madness the Greek gods brought, they found peace and comfort in each other. Ares would never break Aphrodite's heart, and Aphrodite vowed to do the same. For all of eternity, they were bound to one another, and it was a beautiful thing. I hope you have enjoyed this sleep story and that it has brought a night of peaceful, restful sleep. Please join me again tomorrow night for another sleep story. Until then, sweet dreams.